The rooftop bar was exquisite. String lights flickered like stars just within reach. A jazz trio played near the edge of the balcony, their notes curling softly into the night. The skyline of Chicago sparkled with promise, the kind Camille had chased since she was 19. She stood in the center of it all, a glass of Dom Perignon in hand, surrounded by powerful people in tailored suits and sequined dresses. Her boss had just finished a toast in her honor. Promotions came and went in the firm, but this one was special. Camille was the youngest regional marketing director in company history. People clapped, some hugged her, others took selfies, tagged her on Instagram, and toasted again. "Here's to Camille," they said, "the future face of the company." But Camille didn't feel like the future of anything. She felt like a silhouette standing in front of someone else's spotlight. She smiled for the cameras, she hugged back, she laughed on cue. But on the inside, there was a quiet ache in her chest, a kind of sadness that had no name, a hollowness that echoed even louder with every cheer around her. She should have felt triumphant. She had worked for this, sacrificed sleep, weekends, relationships. She had earned this recognition. But now that she had it, she felt small. Not humbled, not shy, just empty. Like she'd been climbing a mountain for 10 years only to reach the peak and realize there was no view. Only clouds and silence. She took another sip of champagne. It didn't taste like victory. It tasted like pressure. Around her, the music was getting louder. A VP from New York had just arrived, waving a cigar, and offered her a partnership opportunity with a smirk and a wink. "Think about it, Camille," he said. "This could be the start of something even bigger." She nodded politely, but her eyes drifted to her phone. A new message from Grandma Rose. Subject, "Happy 80th to me." Camille blinked. She opened the message. It was a photo. Blurry, like it had been taken with shaky hands. A slightly crooked cake, 8 small candles, and Grandma Rose sitting alone in her living room, wearing her favorite blue sweater, smiling. Behind her, cheap paper streamers from holidays past hung on the wall, faded, creased, reused. There was no one else in the photo. No balloons, no family, no joy in the air. Just her and the quiet flicker of wax. Camille froze. The noise around her laughter, clinking glasses, music vanished. It all became muffled, like someone had pushed her underwater. Her chest tightened. Her hands went cold. No one had told her it was Grandma's birthday today. No one had sent a reminder. No one had said a word. Because no one else cared enough to remember. And the cruelest part? Grandma hadn't asked for anything. Not a call, not a visit, just a photo, a message, a whisper from the shadows saying, "I'm still here. I still exist." And Camille in that moment couldn't breathe. 6 words, that's all it said. "Happy 80th to me." No exclamation mark, no emojis, just plain, quiet words typed like a whisper into the void. Camille stared at them again and again. "Happy 80th to me. Happy 80th to me." It didn't sound like celebration. It sounded like resignation. Like someone who had waited and then realized no one was coming. And instead of crying, Grandma Rose picked up her phone and sent a message to remind the world she still existed, to remind someone that today had meaning. It hit Camille like a truck. The guilt punched her in the stomach so hard she had to grip the edge of the bar to steady herself. She had remembered meetings. She had remembered investor pitches. She had remembered to RSVP for a product launch in Miami and pick the right heels for tonight. But she hadn't remembered her own grandmother's birthday, a woman who once carried her through fevers and nightmares, a woman who made her grilled cheese in the shape of hearts, a woman who never forgot Camille's birthday, not once, not even when she had arthritis so bad she couldn't hold a pen. And now Grandma was sitting alone on her 80th birthday with nothing but a crooked cake and a tired smile. And Camille was here, in heels that pinched. wearing a dress that cost more than Grandma's entire grocery budget, drinking champagne with people who wouldn't remember her name in a month. She looked down at her phone one more time. Happy 80th to me. 6 words, 6 blades, and each one sliced straight through her soul. Camille didn't say a word. She didn't explain. She didn't excuse herself. She just stood up. She placed the champagne flute down on the table. The stem of the glass made a soft tap, the only sound in her world right then. Conversations buzzed around her. Laughter echoed behind her. The rooftop was still alive, but she wasn't in it anymore. She didn't wait for dessert. She didn't hug her boss goodbye. She didn't check her coat. She just walked past the VPs, the influencers, the name-tagged executives who had once made her feel seen. Heels clacked against marble. Her shadow stretched long behind her under the string lights. Her lipstick-perfect smile gone. With each step, her heart pounded louder, not from nerves, from clarity. This wasn't the life she wanted anymore, not if it came at the cost of forgetting the woman who raised her. Not if this, the spotlight, the title, the flutes of gold liquid, meant stepping over the very hands that once held her steady. She reached the elevator. The moment the doors closed, she gasped and cried, but not out of weakness. She cried because she finally remembered who she was. Not Camille, the marketing director, just Camille, the granddaughter of Grandma Rose. And she knew exactly where she needed to be. The valet asked if she needed her coat. Camille shook her head. She wasn't cold. She was burning. Burning from guilt. Burning from rage. Burning from a question that kept screaming inside her. How did we get here? How did a woman like Grandma Rose, who gave everything, end up celebrating her 80th birthday alone? Camille gripped the steering wheel. It was just past 9 p.m. The Chicago skyline shrank behind her as she sped out of the city, headlights slicing through the dark like a blade. Her dress still clung to her skin. Her heels were off, thrown into the passenger seat. The makeup was still perfect, but her soul was unraveling. She didn't play music. She didn't call anyone. She didn't cry. Not yet. For the first hour, she was silent. The silence was deafening. Only the hum of the road and the pounding in her chest. She remembered birthdays past, ones with balloons, cousins, candles, laughter, all centered around Grandma Rose's home. And now, the woman who once baked 6 pies from scratch was eating a slice of crooked cake, alone. Her jaw clenched. Tears threatened, but she wouldn't let them fall. Not until she got there. Not until she looked her grandmother in the eye and said, "I remember. I'm sorry, and I'm here." Mile by mile, guilt turned to resolve. Tears turned to fire. By the 3rd hour, her hands had stopped shaking. By the 4th, she was whispering to the night, "Never again. Never again will she be alone." And by the 5th hour, just as the clock hit 2:07 a.m., Camille pulled into the driveway of the little house with the yellow porch light. She was home, but more than that, she was righting a wrong. Before Camille knocked on the door, before she stepped out of the car, before her fingers even reached the handle, a memory hit her. A small kitchen, warm light, the smell of cinnamon and laundry detergent. Camille was 5, perched on a stool with her feet swinging mid-air. She watched Grandma Rose, her hands dusted with flour, her hair tied back in a scarf, humming along to the radio. There were no expensive appliances, no granite countertops, just love, unspoken, tireless love. Grandma Rose had always made something out of nothing. When her husband died of a heart attack at just 39, she didn't cry for long. She didn't have time. 3 daughters, 1 mortgage, no college degree, no savings. But she had hands, and she had heart. So she used both. By day, she worked as a librarian, checking out books, shelving titles, memorizing the names of children who came in alone. By night, she wore an apron and served plates at the corner diner, always with a smile, always with a tired twinkle in her eye. And in between, she was a mother who learned to patch school uniforms with dental floss, a mother who traded babysitting for grocery coupons, a mother who made bedtime stories out of real-life struggles, but always ended them with hope. Camille remembered once asking her, "Grandma, weren't you ever tired?" And Rose smiled, wiped her brow, and said, "Honey, I didn't have the luxury of tired. I had the responsibility of love." Camille remembered that winter. It wasn't just cold, it was brutal. The kind of cold that made your breath hang in the air like ghosts. The kind that crept through windows, cracked old floorboards, and turned bedtime into survival. The heating had broken. There wasn't enough money to fix it. And snow piled outside like it was building a wall to trap them in. She had been 7. Her twin cousins were visiting for the holidays. 3 kids, 1 tiny room, and 1 mattress. That night, they all shivered in silence. No complaints, just noses red from the chill and fingers tucked into armpits for warmth. And then the door creaked open. Grandma Rose stood there with a bundle in her arms, a patchwork quilt. Not store-bought, not polished, just hundreds of scraps, old pajamas, worn t-shirts, torn dresses stitched together with a needle and patience. Every square was a memory. Her mother's church dress, Camille's baby onesie, her aunt's apron from her first job. The quilt wasn't beautiful, but it was sacred. Grandma didn't say anything. She just unfolded it, covered them all, and sat at the edge of the bed. She hummed something soft, maybe a hymn, maybe just a tune she made up on the spot. And slowly, warmth returned, not from the quilt, but from her presence. Camille remembered that night more vividly than any Christmas morning, not because of what they got, but because of what they were given: security, love, and the quiet assurance you matter, even in the cold. Sacrifice, at first, feels noble. It feels like love in its purest form, burning yourself so someone else can stay warm. But over time, it becomes something else, something heavier, something lonelier. Grandma Rose never asked for recognition, not once. She didn't hang her exhaustion like a badge. She didn't remind her daughters of the nights she skipped dinner so they could eat. She just kept giving. New shoes when Linda needed them for debate club, lunch money when Cynthia lost hers again. A ride across town in the rain when their father wasn't around to pick them up. And when they finally graduated, when they got good jobs and moved into polished apartments, they didn't look back. They didn't ask if she needed anything. They stopped coming by. Phone calls turned into texts. Texts turned into silence. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was gradual. It came like rust, not loud, but steady, until one day Grandma Rose was no longer the center of the family. She was the footnote, the sweet old woman you called at holidays if you remembered, the grandmother you meant to visit but never had time. And perhaps the cruelest thing, she never resented them. Not really. She just smiled and waited. And every time the phone didn't ring, she told herself, "They're busy. That's a good thing. I raised strong girls." But even the strongest hearts have quiet corners where abandonment echoes. Camille had always believed her family was close enough. Sure, they didn't talk every day. Sure, holidays were sometimes rushed, strained, polite, more than warm. But she told herself that was just how grown-up life worked. People got busy. People moved on. That's what she believed. Until she saw that photo. Until she saw a cake with melting candles, and a woman who had once been the very center of their universe now sitting in silence with only a camera and memory as witnesses. And in that moment, Camille saw it clearly. Love that isn't fed dies. Not with explosions, but with silence. She had always assumed Grandma was fine, that someone else was checking in, that being strong meant she didn't need much. But now she saw what strength had cost her. Being strong had made everyone think she didn't need love anymore. And that was the cruelty of it. The more Rose gave, the more invisible she became. Camille felt the shame in her bones.
She remembered all the times she didn't answer Grandma's call, all the times she replied, "Can't talk now, big deadline," without realizing each message might have been Grandma's only human contact that day. And she remembered the last Christmas, when Grandma sent her a handmade card, and Camille never opened it. It still sat unopened in the drawer of her apartment. Love unacknowledged, love unopened. That was the moment Camille knew she had been raised by a woman who gave everything and had asked for nothing, and still got even less. It was just a conversation, just coffee and small talk at a cafe. But Camille would remember that moment for the rest of her life. She had flown home for Thanksgiving a year earlier. The whole family gathered at Aunt Cynthia's house. Camille had noticed Grandma Rose sitting in the corner quietly folding napkins, refilling water, helping in the kitchen like she always did. No one seemed to notice her. Later, while pouring herself coffee, Camille overheard something. Aunt Cynthia, leaning across the kitchen island, talking to her sister, Camille's mom. Her voice was low but sharp, frustrated. "She's just too much sometimes, always wanting to be involved. I swear old people really need to learn their boundaries." Camille froze. She almost dropped the mug in her hand. Boundaries? The woman who sacrificed her youth, her body, her sleep, who stitched Halloween costumes by candlelight and walked miles to parent-teacher conferences, now needed to stay out of the way? Camille turned to look at Grandma, still drying dishes with her back to the room. She hadn't heard it. Or maybe she had, and just said nothing. That's what hurt the most. Not the words, but how normal they felt in that house.
No one flinched. No one gasped. No one stood up for her. It was just another comment, another invisible cut to a woman already fading from the picture. And Camille realized sometimes betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers, with fake smiles and phrases like, "Don't make it about you," or "You're overreacting," or "Just let the young ones handle it now." That day, Camille saw it with open eyes. Her grandmother wasn't just being forgotten, she was being erased. The street was quiet. Camille turned off the engine and sat in the dark, letting the silence settle over her like a blanket. It was just after 2 a.m. She stared at the little house in front of her, the same one that had held generations of birthdays, snow days, and stories whispered under quilts. The porch light glowed a gentle yellow, not bright, not cold, just warm, familiar. She grabbed her overnight bag and stepped out into the night. Her heels were long gone. She wore only socks and raw determination. With each step up the walkway, her throat tightened. Her heart pounded like it wanted to apologize first. She reached the door and knocked softly at first. Nothing. She waited, then tried again. Still nothing. But just as she turned to step back, the porch light flickered, the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. There she was, Grandma Rose. Wearing her favorite blue robe and those same pink fuzzy slippers Camille remembered from every childhood sleepover. Her hair was messy, her eyes were tired, but the moment she saw Camille standing there, her whole body shook. "Camille!" her voice cracked. Camille stepped forward, tears already falling. "Of course it's me," she whispered, and she opened her arms. Grandma didn't walk. She collapsed into that hug. Her hands clung to Camille's back like she was afraid to let go. Her body trembled, not from cold, from being seen, from finally being remembered. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not missed calls, not birthdays forgotten, only this, two souls relearning what it meant to simply hold each other. The door shut behind them with a soft click. Inside the house was exactly as Camille remembered it, but smaller, quieter, as if it too had aged. The wallpaper had faded at the corners, the couch sagged a little more than it used to. But everything smelled the same, cinnamon dust and the faint hint of lavender lotion. And then she saw it, the cake, still on the table, still whole, a little crooked like it had leaned too long in the warmth of the kitchen.
One of the candles had burned down and split the frosting like a tiny canyon. It hadn't been touched. No slice missing, no fork beside the plate, just waiting for someone who never showed.
Camille walked over slowly, as if disturbing the air would make the cake vanish. She ran her fingers over the hardened edge of the icing. Homemade. Of course it was. It always was. She turned to look at Grandma, who stood quietly in the doorway watching. "I didn't want to throw it away," Grandma whispered. "I thought maybe someone might still come." Camille swallowed. The lump in her throat nearly choked her. She pulled out a chair and sat down. Then, slowly, gently, she cut a slice. "Happy birthday, Grandma," she said, her voice breaking. "Let's eat. Together." After the cake, Grandma reached for a dusty box from beneath the coffee table. It wasn't fancy, just a shoebox, faded and soft around the edges, the kind you didn't throw away, even if you had nowhere to put it. She opened it slowly, as if peeling back time itself. Inside were photographs, some curled at the corners. Some black and white, others tinged with age, the kind that turned skin tones into sepia and smiles into ghosts. Camille leaned in. The first one was of 3 girls standing barefoot in front of a tiny porch, all of them holding popsicles, all of them smiling, but only one truly glowing, the woman behind the camera, Grandma Rose. "That was the summer I fixed the back fence with a hammer and 2 nails," Grandma chuckled. "They thought I was magic." Camille laughed softly. But as they sifted through more photos, something began to shift. There was one of her mom around age 14, arms crossed, eyes rolled. Another of Aunt Linda at a graduation, barely smiling. Grandma standing a few steps behind. In every photo, Grandma was there, but never in the center, always behind. Always clapping, cooking, cleaning, never seen, but always holding it all together. Camille felt the sting in her chest. There, it was documented frame by frame, the quiet disappearance of a woman who had given everything. "They used to fight, you know," Grandma said quietly, pulling out a picture of all 3 daughters sitting on the couch, stiff, unsmiling. "I'd walk into a room and they'd go quiet. I thought they were just teenagers, but maybe they were already starting to forget me." Camille didn't know what to say, because some truths don't have comforting answers. They just sit there like old photos, fading. They sat on the couch, side-by-side photos, now scattered like memories on the coffee table. The clock ticked softly behind them, not rushing, not judging, just listening. Grandma Rose leaned back with a small sigh, the kind of sigh that carried both relief and years of unsaid things. Camille sat quietly, her eyes scanning the photos again, then drifting to her grandmother's hands that once braided her hair. That poured cold water on fevers. That wrote tiny notes in lunchboxes even when the fridge was almost empty. Camille swallowed hard. Then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "I remember the soup you used to make when I was sick." Her voice cracked. "I hated being sick, but part of me always hoped for that soup." Grandma turned her head slowly, her eyes glassy with surprise. Camille laughed through her tears. "It had that weird chicken and too much pepper. And it always burned my tongue because I never waited. But it felt like magic." A pause. Then her voice broke completely. I never said thank you." And with that, the dam broke. Tears fell years' worth for all the calls missed, for every birthday forgotten, for every memory Camille took for granted. Grandma didn't say anything. She just reached out, took Camille's face in her hands, and rested their foreheads together. "No need, baby," she said, voice trembling. "I always knew you loved me." They sat there, heads still leaning together, 2 hearts once apart, now beating in quiet rhythm again. For a while there was only stillness, the kind of stillness that only comes after tears, the sacred kind,
the kind that feels like peace after a storm. And then, Grandma Rose chuckled. Out of nowhere, a soft, rasping sound, half laugh, half sigh, as if she'd remembered something funny from long ago. Camille looked up, eyes still wet. "What?" she asked. Grandma smiled, crooked and warm. "I just remembered. When you were little, you swore you'd grow up to be a ballerina, a vet, and the president, all at once." Camille laughed, really laughed. "Oh, God, I did say that, didn't I?" Grandma nodded. "Big dreams, even then." There was a pause. Then Camille whispered, "I still want big things, but not for me anymore, for you." She reached across the table, took her grandmother's hands, those same hands that once held hers through every nightmare, and said, "I promise, you'll never feel forgotten again, not while I'm breathing." Grandma didn't respond right away, but her eyes welled, her lips quivered, and when she finally spoke, it came out as a whisper. "That's all I ever wanted." That night, long after the cake was gone and the pictures were packed away, they sat in the living room with no TV, no distractions, just each other. And for the first time in years, Camille didn't feel like she was running anymore. She had arrived, not just at Grandma's house, but back to where love lived. The sun hadn't risen yet. Outside, the street was still draped in shadows. But inside that little living room, something had shifted. Camille had made a decision. A quiet, steady kind of decision, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that grows deep in the chest and settles behind the ribs like truth. Grandma Rose had just finished folding the quilt they used that night. She was humming something under her breath, moving slowly but with the grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times alone. Camille watched her for a moment, then spoke, voice soft but certain, "You're coming home with me, Grandma." Grandma paused. She looked up, confused. "Home?" Camille nodded. "Not just for a visit, for good." There was a beat of silence. Then Grandma chuckled gently, trying to wave it off. "Oh no, honey, I'd just be in the way. I've got my routines here, my garden, my—" Camille stepped closer. "You were never in the way. You were the way." Grandma blinked. Camille went on, "You built this family with your hands and your back and your heart. You gave up everything, and we repaid you with distance." She paused, swallowing hard. "I can't change the past, but I can change what happens next." Silence. Then, for the first time in a long time, Grandma Rose sat down. Not because she was tired, but because for once, someone was asking her to rest. It started with orange zest. Not fame, not some master plan, just a cake. An old family recipe. The one Grandma Rose used to bake every Sunday after church when Camille was little. Soft crumb, glazed top. That smell, oranges, vanilla, and something else you couldn't quite name. Maybe comfort, maybe love. Camille had asked offhandedly, "Grandma, what's that orange cake you used to make when I had the flu?" Grandma's eyes lit up. "Oh, my sunshine cake! I haven't made that in years." So one rainy Saturday, they did. The kitchen filled with flower clouds, sticky fingers, and that unmistakable citrus scent. As Camille licked the frosting spoon, she blurted, "You should write this down, like, share it, maybe start a blog." Grandma Rose laughed. "Who would want recipes from an old woman with crooked fingers?" Camille tilted her head. "Millions, millions of people who need warmth in their lives. You've got that." That night, they sat together at Camille's kitchen table, a laptop between them. The name came easily, Roz's Remedies. A place for recipes, yes, but also for healing, for comfort, for stories, for mending the kinds of cracks no doctor could fix. And the first post, "Sunshine cake for days that need light." It wasn't supposed to go viral. The first post was just a recipe. The second, a short reflection on grief and marmalade, about how Rose kept a jar of orange jam in the pantry even after her husband died, because some flavors remind you that someone loved you once. Camille hit publish without a second thought, then went to bed. By sunrise, the blog had 8,000 views. By lunchtime, it was over 27,000. And the comments, they weren't just from home cooks or hobby bakers. They were from people, raw, aching, lonely people. My grandma died last winter. I never said thank you. I'm 42 and haven't talked to my mom in years. I'm calling her now. This blog saved my Sunday. Post by post, story by story, Grandma Rose's words reached through the screen and held people's hearts gently like a warm quilt on a cold night. There was no clickbait, no marketing tricks.
Just truth wrapped in tenderness. One day, a woman in Oregon sent a message, "I made your banana bread and cried the whole time. It tasted like childhood. Thank you for helping me remember I'm not invisible." Another wrote, "My daughter's away at college. I read your blog out loud when I miss her. You're helping me feel like a mom again." Soon, the blog wasn't just Raz's Remedies. It was a movement. The email subject line simply read, "You've changed my life. Would you be willing to talk?" It came from a producer at a national morning show, one of those programs that millions of Americans watched while sipping coffee in their kitchens. At first, Grandma Rose thought it was a scam. Camille had to sit her down, read the message aloud twice, and gently assure her, "Grandma, they're not joking. They want you on live television." Her hands shook. Her first instinct was to say no. "I don't belong there," she whispered. But Camille looked at her, truly looked, and said, "You belong more than anyone else." Weeks later, Grandma Rose sat on a velvet couch under studio lights, wearing a soft lavender blouse and a delicate pearl brooch. Across from her sat the host, polished, famous, and clearly moved. "You've built something remarkable, Miss Rose," the host said. "Did you ever imagine that sharing recipes and memories could touch so many people?" Grandma smiled, that warm, steady, quiet smile, and answered, "I didn't write to be famous. I wrote to feel less invisible." The audience fell silent, and then erupted in applause. From that day forward, everything changed. She was invited to speak on podcasts, webinars, and radio interviews. A book publisher offered her a deal, not just for recipes, but for life stories, essays, and gentle truths. The book would be called The Softest Things Survive. Within months, Grandma Rose's name was trending nationwide, but she didn't let it go to her head. She still fed the neighbor's cat, still clipped coupons, still watered her violets every morning. But now her voice was being heard. Finally, after 80 years, the world listened. It started with just one email. Subject line, "I watched you on TV. I cried." A woman in Ohio wrote, "I'm 76. My children live in California. I haven't spoken to them in 6 years. I didn't think anyone cared about people like me anymore." Until you smiled into that camera. Then another came, and another. Handwritten letters, Facebook messages, comments from forgotten corners of the internet, old men and women from trailer parks, nursing homes, small towns, and big cities, all writing to Grandma Rose. "I used to be a teacher. Now I sit alone and feed pigeons in the park. My grandkids don't even know my birthday. No one has hugged me in over a year." Camille watched as the inbox overflowed. She offered to help, but Grandma Rose shook her head. "They wrote to me. I will write them back." So every night, with a cup of chamomile tea and a wool shawl around her shoulders, Grandma Rose sat down with her iPad and answered. Not with generic replies, not with copy-paste pity, but with stories, memories, real words, real care. "Dear Harold, I used to hum that same tune while hanging clothes outside in spring. Thank you for reminding me." "Dear Marcia, I bet your garden is beautiful. Send me a photo of those roses you mentioned." One reply became two. Two became 20. Soon she'd written over 600 heartfelt messages. Some were just thank you notes. Others turned into friendships. One man sent her a poem he hadn't shared with anyone in 40 years. Grandma Rose didn't just answer letters. She restored dignity. She offered presents, and without even realizing it, she became the grandmother of a forgotten generation. Camille didn't speak a word about it, not to her coworkers, not even to Grandma Rose. But something had shifted inside her the moment she saw her grandmother become the voice of thousands. This wasn't just healing anymore. This was justice. She opened her laptop and began planning. First step, venue. She scrolled past restaurants and rooftop lounges. None of them felt right. Then she saw it. A grand estate hotel just outside the city. Crystal chandeliers, a sweeping staircase, marble floors, velvet drapes. It screamed, "You'll remember this night forever." She booked it for a Saturday evening, 3 weeks from now. Next, the invitations. Not just any invites. These were custom designed, embossed, wrapped in silk envelopes. The kind of thing her mother and aunts would never ignore. The wording was strategic. You are cordially invited to an exclusive business soiree and family reunion. Dress code formal. Media presence expected. She knew they wouldn't say no, not to anything with cameras. Camille smirked as she pressed send. This wasn't about revenge. It was about showing the world who truly deserved to be celebrated. The sun dipped low as luxury cars began rolling into the circular driveway of the Grand Ellison Estate Hotel. A valet opened each door with white-gloved precision. Guests stepped out in satin gowns, designer heels, and tailored tuxedos. They had no idea. Above the gold-trimmed ballroom doors hung an elegant sign, Celebration of Legacy, a corporate surprise. To them, it screamed, Camille's big night. Aunt Linda showed up in a floor-length wine-colored dress, her husband clinging to his Rolex like a badge of honor. Aunt Cynthia came in pearls, scanning the room for anyone important enough to befriend. Camille's mother arrived last, glossy, late, and smug. The family whispered to each other, speculating about the surprise. A promotion? A rebranding? Maybe Camille was launching her own agency. They weren't wrong, but they had no idea what was truly coming. As guests mingled beneath chandeliers and took selfies by the step and repeat banner, a soft jazz track faded out and the lights dimmed. A hush swept the room. Then the main ballroom doors opened. A spotlight hit the red carpet, and standing at the end of it was Grandma Rose, not in her house slippers, not in her robe, but in a flowing lavender gown, pearls, hair pinned back, eyes steady. The murmurs turned to stunned silence, and one by one their faces changed. They had come to celebrate Camille, but they were about to witness the return of someone they thought would stay forgotten. The clacking of heels echoed like a countdown. Camille watched from the wings as her mother strutted in, first a vision of curated perfection. Her silk gown shimmered under the chandeliers, lips painted in a precise crimson. She tilted her head back as she laughed, a practiced hollow sound made for cocktail parties, not people. Behind her, Aunt Linda breezed in with a glass of champagne already in hand, twirling her clutch like it was a trophy. Aunt Cynthia arrived last, donning a sapphire dress and an expression that said, "You're lucky I showed up." The three women moved like royalty, but of a crumbling, disconnected empire. They posed for pictures at the floral arch, unaware of what loomed behind the velvet curtains. Their laughter bubbled crisp and careless, but it rang false to Camille's ears, like laughter in a graveyard. One by one, they greeted guests. "Where's Camille?" someone asked. "What's the surprise?" Her mother winked. "You'll see," she whispered like a queen about to reveal her latest jewel. But this jewel wasn't hers to shine. They didn't see Grandma yet. They didn't realize they were not the audience. They were the lesson. The music cut. The chatter stopped. A silence fell heavy, sudden, unnatural. As the family walked deeper into the ballroom, their heels clicked on marble floors. And then, the lights shifted. A single spotlight, a soft lavender glow.
And there, standing beneath it all, was Grandma Rose. Not hunched, not frail, but tall, proud, regal. She wore a long, flowing lavender gown, delicate embroidery tracing her neckline. Her silver hair was pinned in soft curls. Around her neck gleamed a pearl necklace Camille had gifted just weeks before. The room exhaled. Some gasped. Others clutched their champagne flutes tighter. The cameras started flashing. Camille stepped beside her, silently dressed simply in black, eyes locked on her family who had finally stopped laughing. Her mother's painted smile faltered. Aunt Linda whispered, What is this?" Aunt Cynthia gripped her clutch like a weapon. And then Grandma Rose stepped forward slowly, deliberately, toward the microphone. She didn't need a cue. She didn't need a script. She had waited a lifetime for this. Her voice, calm, steady, pierced through the silence. On my 80th birthday, I sat alone with a cake I baked myself. My daughters were on yachts. My grandkids were silent. But one person remembered me, Camille. The room froze. No violin swell, no applause, just stunned breath and burning cheeks. Love should not be begged for. Family is not made of likes and comments. Legacy is built through love. She turned to Camille, placed her hand over hers, and smiled. And just like that, the spotlight widened, not just on Grandma, but on everything they had tried to forget. Then the lights dimmed again. The music swelled, not pop, not glamour, but soft piano rising like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the massive LED screen behind Grandma Rose came to life. First, a clip from Rose's Remedies, her gentle voice guiding viewers through a recipe for orange zest pound cake. The trick, she said, smiling, is patience, like most things worth keeping. Next, a TV interview where a host teared up as Grandma recounted her lonely 80th birthday. I baked that cake, thinking maybe someone would stop by. Then fan letters, hundreds of them, typed, handwritten, some scrawled in shaky cursive from aged hands. Messages like, "Your story gave me the courage to call my mother again. I cried with you. Thank you for making me feel seen." Then a reveal of her upcoming book, cover title in bold, "Remember Me While I'm Still Here." And finally, a short montage of elderly men and women from nursing homes to quiet apartments holding up signs that read, "Thank you, Grandma Rose. You made me feel real again. I matter." In the room, no one moved. No one breathed. Even the champagne lost its sparkle. Camille's mother looked down. Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes, mascara bleeding. Aunt Cynthia stared blankly, for once speechless. The moment didn't ask for revenge. It offered something more powerful, truth. And truth, when shown on a 10-foot screen in front of cameras, doesn't need to scream. The spotlight followed her like reverence chasing legacy. Grandma Rose stepped onto the stage, slow, steady shoulders back. She wore a lavender chiffon gown, elegant and soft-flowing like history itself. Her hair pinned in graceful waves. Around her neck, a single strand of pearls, each one earned through decades of quiet sacrifice. The entire room stood still. Even the cameras paused, as if unsure whether they were allowed to capture something so sacred. This wasn't a woman stepping into fame. This was a woman reclaiming her name. And when she reached the center of the stage, she didn't smile for attention. She smiled because she finally didn't need to beg for love. Camille stood just behind the curtain watching, holding her breath. Her mother, red lipstick, trembling, gripped her glass like a lifeline. Aunt Linda blinked too quickly. Aunt Cynthia shifted in her heels, suddenly too tight. Grandma took the microphone. She looked into the crowd, not to shame them, but to awaken them. And then softly, with all the power of a lifetime of being silent, she spoke. Grandma Rose's voice, though soft, silenced the entire room. She looked out across the sea of designer dresses and silk ties, faces she once knew, now too polished to remember their roots. Then she said, "On my 80th birthday, I sat alone. Beside a cake I baked myself. There were no candles blown out with laughter, no phone calls, not even a card." The words fell like feathers, but landed like bricks. Camille felt her heart twist, not in anger, but in pride, because her grandmother wasn't saying this for revenge. She was saying it for truth. "I thought maybe I wasn't needed anymore. Maybe love has an expiration date. Maybe quiet women just fade away." She paused. Even the waiters froze one mid-step with a tray of flutes. Then she smiled. Not at them, but at Camille. "But someone remembered me. Someone dropped everything to come home. She reminded me that love doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be there." Silence. Then applause. It wasn't just clapping. It was a release. Aunt Cynthia looked down. Aunt Linda blinked back tears. Camille's mother closed her eyes ashamed. Grandma Rose stepped back, handed the mic off, and walked down the stage like a queen whose crown no longer needed gold, just grace. As the applause died down, Grandma Rose leaned back into the mic, her eyes never leaving Camille. Her voice was softer this time, as if she was speaking only to her, but the entire room leaned in. In life, we all forget things. Appointments, birthdays, people who once tucked us in at night. It happens. Life gets loud, selfish, busy. She paused. But Camille remembered. When no one else did, she came. She looked past the wrinkles, past the silence, and she saw me. There was no anger in her voice, no blame, no bitterness, just the gentle strength of a woman who had nothing left to prove. I will remember that forever, because love doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it just needs to show up. She smiled, not to shame anyone, but to honor the one person who showed up when it mattered most. Camille felt tears well in her eyes, but this time they weren't from guilt. They were from something sacred, something finally whole. The ballroom erupted. Cameras clicked like a hailstorm. Applause thundered off the marble walls, echoing as if the universe itself was clapping. But Camille didn't hear any of it. She only heard her grandmother's words echoing inside her ribs like a heartbeat. Across the room, her mother, once flawless, composed, immovable, was now still, frozen. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She simply stared down at the edge of her wine glass. Her fingers trembled just slightly. For the first time in decades, she wasn't the one being celebrated. She was the one being called out without a single word pointed at her. Aunt Linda glanced nervously toward the exit. Aunt Cynthia clutched her designer purse like a life vest. But no one said a thing. The applause continued, but the silence between the family members was deafening. As the applause slowly faded and cameras lowered, Camille stepped forward. She wasn't holding a mic. She didn't need one. The room was already listening. She stood beside Grandma Rose, not in front, not behind, beside. Her voice was calm, but in every syllable lived years of guilt, gratitude, and fury, finally set free. "This," she said, motioning to the chandeliers, the cameras, the stage, "this is the celebration she should have had all along." There was no applause, no gasp, only stillness. A truth so loud it drowned out every excuse ever made. You all forgot her. You had your reasons, but I had enough. She looked at her mother, her aunts. Their eyes refused to meet hers. You made her think she was a burden. I'm here to remind you she was the foundation. She turned to Grandma Rose, her voice breaking slightly. This is for every night she went to bed hungry so you could eat, for every handmade birthday dress she sewed, for every time she cried alone while pretending to smile. This is not revenge. This is remembrance, and it's long overdue. Grandma squeezed her hand. Tears rolled freely, not just on their cheeks, but across the room. In that moment, justice didn't roar, it whispered, and that whisper cracked open hearts. The event ended, the lights dimmed, the cameras were packed away. The guests filtered out, some with shame, some with awe. But Grandma Rose, she didn't bask in glory. She simply took off her heels, slipped back into her flats, and smiled. That night, the voicemails began. From Camille's mother, slurred, teary, rambling apologies. From Aunt Linda, scripted, cautious, "We just didn't know." From Aunt Cynthia, a fruit basket at the doorstep. No note, just silence. Camille asked her, "Do you want to call them back?" Grandma Rose just sipped her tea, looked out the window at the moonlight, and said, "No, dear, I'm not angry. I'm just not waiting anymore." There was no bitterness in her voice, only softness, acceptance, liberation. People don't have to be cruel to be careless. Sometimes forgetting is the loudest way to say you don't care. And then she turned back to her jasmine plant, adjusting its leaves. But I remember who showed up. That's what I'll hold on to. That moment taught Camille something no business book ever had. True peace isn't winning the argument, it's walking away free. It started with a publisher's email. Subject line, "From blog to book, we're interested." Camille read it aloud to Grandma Rose, who almost dropped her tea. "They want to publish me," Camille nodded. "They don't want your pain. They want your wisdom. They want you." The book was titled Letters to the Blooming Stories of Hope from the Forgotten. It wasn't flashy. Just a collection of her stories, blog entries, reader letters, and responses filled with warmth, honesty, and resilience. When it launched, it exploded. Morning shows, book signings, bookstores with staff pick stickers, and shelves that emptied within days. She made the New York Times bestseller list in a week. But that wasn't what moved her. It was the letters, from seniors in nursing homes, from grandmothers who hadn't received a call in months, from children regretting the silence between them and their aging parents. "You made me call my mom again. You reminded me that I matter. You saved my life." That's when Camille and Grandma Rose created the foundation The Forgotten Bloom, a nonprofit supporting abandoned seniors with care packages, community visits, story circles, even emergency funds. And the first words on its website, "You may be forgotten, but you are not done blooming." It wasn't charity. It was reclamation. It was justice and love in action. It didn't happen overnight. Camille had spent nearly a decade climbing the corporate ladder, late nights, perfect pitches, high heels, and higher pressure. And she was good at it. Too good. But after Grandma Rose moved in, something shifted. Success started to feel hollow. She'd come home from client meetings to find her grandmother sitting on the porch, sipping tea, replying to messages from strangers she'd somehow made feel seen. Camille started to wonder, why am I spending my days helping brands I don't believe in when I could be building something that actually means something? The final straw, a quarterly meeting where a VP praised her record-breaking digital strategy, then made a joke about old people not understanding hashtags. The room laughed. Camille didn't. That night, she drafted her resignation letter. "I'm not walking away from success," she wrote. "I'm walking toward significance." 1 month later, Rose & Company was born, a boutique marketing agency, but with a soul. They worked only with mission-driven brands, mental health startups, sustainable fashion, nonprofits for the elderly. And at the center of it all, in every team meeting, on every wall, a framed photo of Grandma Rose laughing mid-dance, eyes shining like she had never been forgotten. Because Camille finally understood, legacy isn't built in boardrooms. Legacy is built in living rooms, in moments of truth, in choices that echo beyond us. It began with a promise. "Let's go somewhere you've always dreamed of, Grandma." She hesitated like someone who'd spent too long being told she didn't matter. Then she whispered, "Italy. I've always wanted to see the sunrise in Rome, like in the old movies." So they went. They stood on a quiet rooftop at 5 a.m., steaming espresso in hand, watching the sky shift from indigo to fire. Grandma Rose cried not from sadness, but from awe. Not because she missed the past, but because she finally had a present worth living in. From there, the world opened up. Kenya, where they rode in open jeeps, hair wild in the wind, and fed baby elephants who clung to Grandma like she was their own. Kyoto, where they wrote wishes on lanterns and watched them float across the river under a velvet sky. Santorini, where Camille took the most beautiful photo of her life, Grandma laughing so hard she nearly dropped her gelato. Each country, each city, each breath was a love letter to all the years Grandma had given, and this time, someone finally wrote back. Camille documented everything, not for likes, not for followers, but because every smile Grandma gave the world was a revolution against being forgotten. "We're not escaping," Camille told a reporter once. "We're collecting proof that love, late as it may come, still has wings." The hall had quieted, the applause had faded into gentle murmurs, and then Grandma Rose stood up once more. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for Camille. She took the mic with both hands, her fingers calm and steady, her pearl necklace shimmering under the soft golden light. She looked out at the crowd, some familiar, some strangers, some still teary-eyed. Then, with a smile so peaceful it could quiet a storm, she said, "For most of my life, I waited. I waited to be seen, to be called, to be thanked, to be remembered." She paused. A hush fell over the room like snowfall. But I realized waiting was making me invisible. So I stopped. I stopped waiting to be remembered, and I started remembering myself. She turned to Camille and added, "And because one person remembered me when it mattered, I finally learned how to remember who I was all along." She bowed gently, and the crowd once again rose to their feet, but this time in absolute silence. Not a word, just tears, just reverence, not out of pity, but out of something far more powerful, recognition. In that moment, everyone wasn't just looking at Grandma Rose. They were looking at someone they'd forgotten in their own lives. And perhaps they were finally ready to remember. Sometimes we get so caught up in chasing success, chasing likes, chasing the next vacation, that we forget the people who once gave up everything just so we could stand where we are today. This story isn't just about Grandma Rose. It's about every forgotten parent, every overlooked grandparent, every silent hero who once carried us and now waits quietly, hoping we'll remember. Don't wait until it's too late. Call them, visit them, show up. Love is not a grand gesture. It's a decision we make daily. A birthday missed is more than a date. It's a wound that might never heal. Let this be your reminder. Real legacy isn't built on titles, awards, or vacations. It's built on loyalty, empathy, and being there, especially when no one else is. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, don't scroll away just yet. Share your story in the comments. Send this to someone who might need to remember. And hit subscribe to join a community where we see the world through her eyes. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to change how we love.